that's been very much the underpinning of a lot of the policy initiatives that have occurred over the last 3 years. And in the short time I have left, I'll just quickly go through some of those policies, because essentially Melbourne 2030 and Melbourne at 5 million and the Transport Plan are about both measured increase in population density as well as accommodating the growth of the city. And quite frankly, we need to do both. We need to do both not just simply because it's driven by developers. We need to do both because essentially it's a profound issue of equity. If we stop the growth of Melbourne, and I'm not one to say you grow at all costs, you have to grow high quality suburbs, and it's true that for a 30 or 40 year period in this state we did not do that. But you have to be able to accommodate growth, because as soon as you stop growth, then what you do is you stop the game and you provide huge opportunities and windfall gains for people who are in the market, and you make it almost impossible for people who are outside the market to get the sort of quality of life that we have. And that rubs against a very strong grain of our value system. So to simply say we would become a European city that has high density is simply not enough. Our challenge when we grow new suburbs is actually to make those new suburbs as high a quality as the suburbs that were created and within which most of us live. And that becomes the big challenge for us. So whether it's the focus on developing central activity districts around the middle edges of Melbourne, employment corridors, increasing housing density, a variety of different new planning tools in terms of zoning and housing growth requirements, the movement of the urban growth boundary, all of these are about creating a multi-centred city that is a high-quality suburban city in the way I'm talking about suburbs, not necessarily in the way we're talking about them or have spoken about them in the United States. Now, just very quickly, and I'm conscious running out of time, there's a lot of activity in government over the last decade in terms of the concepts of different aspects of placemaking. I've got a list of 4 or 5 or 6 there, which just reflect different aspects of a community development approach to spatial development. And one of the, I think, very productive things that are occurring is that within government we are learning the art of conversation back into communities. And that's an art that I think we lost a long time ago, and it's an art that will probably, and a series of skills and behaviours that will probably take us another decade to develop properly. But what you can see from this list here is both in terms of large geographic spaces, in terms of very local neighbourhood-based activities, in terms of central activity districts, in terms of private sector development like Caroline Springs, and I think you're going to have Michael Tudwell later on tomorrow or today talking about the experience of Caroline Springs. All these have elements of placemaking which are really about both local community engagement and also measured and rational allocation of government resources when they're needed. And one of the big challenges of growing new suburbs, and the experience that we've actually lost in much of the urban development that went on in the 80s onwards, is we had housing developments with no services, which is a disaster. And it's that aspect that people resolve from. And it's that aspect that we need to learn, and we would say we're trying to get the tools in place to learn, so that as we open up new land, the heavy infrastructure is there as well as the soft infrastructure is there. And I think that we might say that's a new insight. I would just say that's a recovery of an old insight. So let me quickly conclude, just to reiterate some of the points that I'd made earlier. The importance of understanding that Melbourne is a suburban city, and so the language of placemaking needs to reflect that. I think, Carol, you also made the point that we don't take models from overseas and just plonk them into our environment, and that's absolutely necessary. It's very important that we do learn from overseas, and that people that come from other jurisdictions learn from us. But it's also critically important that we can actually translate it into our own context. And what I don't see in the broad public policy debate is a clear understanding of this very simple statement, that Melbourne is a suburban city, and it has, either by omission or commission, sometimes done placemaking very well and sometimes done it not very well, but the notion of place and the suburban space as high quality amenity where people want to live is absolutely at the core of what we do. We've got to recover that. So I think the debates about urban sprawl versus urban consolidation as though it's one or the other is a dead-end debate, and it does us there's no value in actually continuing that debate. I think it's really about developing high-quality places in which we live in that suburban environment. And finally, I would say that good placemaking, to use a key concept of the conference, can make an important contribution to improving the livability of what is already a very livable city. Thanks very much.